Welcome to the Simple Life podcast, where I take complex health and fitness ideas and break them down into bite-sized, actionable behaviors to simplify your routine so that you can reap the rewards and live a healthy and fulfilled life. I'll also be talking to experts on various topics to broaden your horizons and make sure that you are up to date and across all of the ways that you can improve your fitness, nutrition, and stress management practices. Let's get into it. On today's episode of The Simple Life, we talk to Siobhan Lou. Siobhan is a breathwork coach and runs breathwork classes both in person and online. And she's also the fiance of one of my best friends, Tom. Today we get into her journey from finding breathwork to learning to coaching, how the business has evolved, and also how breathwork can benefit absolutely anyone. It's certainly something that I've opened my mind to, a new idea that I once thought may have been a little bit silly, but as I get older and coach more and more clients, I think the idea of stress management is something that has just become incredibly important, and breathwork seems like a really, really effective way of doing so. So thank you very much to Siobhan for coming on, and let's get into the episode. And Siobhan, welcome to This Simple Life. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come on and educate us all about breathwork.
Yay, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
No worries. I would like to take it all the way baback to the beginning. So I'd like you to give us a little bit of insight as to what you were doing before you found breathwork, and just give us a little bit of history on how you've kind of stumbled into this space.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was actually a sports coach, CrossFit coach. I was fully into fitness before I found breathwork. And then I went to Bali to actually manage a gym over there. And while we were over there, I actually went through probably like just a really shit phase of anxiety and depression. I actually didn't know what anxiety was or what depression was. And I used to laugh when people say, oh, I've got anxiety. And I would just be like, yeah, whatever. It's just like a word people throw around. I had no idea what it was. And then moving to Bali, it was kind of like on paper, I was living this absolutely perfect life. Like we had a villa, we had a maid, I was the manager of a gym, I was living like the Bali lifestyle. But I was actually just mentally, I wasn't good. I was basically in a really deep, dark hole, just going through the motions of everyday life, like turning up to work. And then I started having panic attacks. And I always laugh about it because when I was explaining it to Tom, who's my partner, I said to him one day he came home, I was like, oh, I had this like funny turn today. And he's like, funny turn? What do you mean? And he's like, sat me down and I had to explain what happened to like my body and my mind. And it actually felt like I was having a heart attack. Like I felt like I was going to die. Like I had to kind of get up and keep walking and pacing back and forth through the villa. And Tom said to me, oh, I think you had a panic attack. And I was like, what's a panic attack? And then he explained, moving through anxiety or in a place of being like unsure and not in control of myself, letting my thoughts kind of get out of hand. We turn into a panic attack. And as soon as I knew what it was from like kind of that label and that experience and really diving deep into talking about it with Tom, I started to actually experience them like a million times a day. Like they would just come back to back to back to back when I was in Bali. So really working through that led into depression. And I didn't really know I was depressed. It was probably like people from the outside would be like, oh, she's not the same, something's wrong with her. But I would never say I was depressed. Like I was exercising every day, I was meditating every day, I was still doing my self-care every day, but deep down I was going through depression. And then as we were managing the gym, we were trying to get different people in to do like different experiences for our members. So like we would try and pull people in like meditation teachers and like dance teachers. And one day we were sitting at a communal table and I asked one of the girls, like I just so happened to say to her, what do you do? And she said, oh, I'm a breathwork teacher. And I was like, amazing. We got chatting and I said, oh, do you want to come into our gym and just do a session for our members? Because we're in Bali, everyone will love breathwork, let's get everyone in to try it, bring people together, bring something new to our gym. And me and Tom were working at the gym and we kind of just said, oh, do you want to just jump in? Like it wasn't planned or anything. And we jump into this breathwork session. And I kind of thought we'd all be standing up, chatting to each other, and talking through, this practice. But we lay down, started to do the breath work. And yeah, it just, that one session changed my whole life. It completely blew my mind. And after that one session, I've never experienced a panic attack since, touch wood. So yeah. And when I was at the very end of the session, I was like, why do people not know that you can change your anxiety, depression, your whole life through your breath? So that kind of like kicked it off for me being like, this is insane. Like, why have I never heard of this?
Yeah.
And that was kind of my introduction to fitness, straight into breathwork.
I do have a couple of questions, and thank you for being so honest with your experiences. But as
Yeah.
a CrossFit coach, I feel, and I was obviously once, and well, still am a personal trainer, but I was once a CrossFit coach, specifically.
Yeah.
But there's a certain kind of attitude I think that comes with CrossFit, especially if you're competitively into CrossFit. And I know the gym you used to coach at in Melbourne, and I know that's obviously very much the way. But how
Yeah.
skeptical were you of, like, if you had told me 5 years ago, like, oh, you can change your, like your chemistry by breathing, I would have been like, shut up. Like, that's ridiculous. Like
Oh,
how,
same,
yeah,
same.
how skeptical were you of the
Absolutely.
process?
Well, what I think I was really kind of lucky with is that we had no idea what we were stepping into. So if the instructor said to me, this is going to release trauma, it's going to connect you to your inner child, you're going to breathe and get rid of all your panic attacks, I don't like bullshit. Like that is not going to happen. So I think I was so lucky that it wasn't on Instagram at the time. It wasn't on Facebook. There was no chat about it. Like I wasn't even in the space of that, but I still had a meditation practice. Like I've been meditating for years, so I still had a practice of doing that. So I
Yeah,
thought, if I can meditate, I can breath work.
yeah.
It's very different. But I just would be, and it's actually my favorite thing as an instructor now is watching people come into a class who are so skeptical, and then at the end of it, they're like, what the fuck just happened?
I mean,
you know?
having that meditation background, I guess you would consider that almost like a bit of a toe in the water. It's sort of like, oh, I'm halfway
Yeah.
there. But yeah, I can only imagine, I'm 30 now, but if you had told me at, 24, 23, oh, just breathe. And I've been like, come on, it would have been just like, you got to try
Yeah.
harder. You've just got to suck it up.
Suck
That
it up.
being
Yeah.
said, and I think it's worth pointing out for a little bit of context that, I've obviously known Tom for near 20 years, and he's
Yeah.
the perfect person to have in your corner for a situation like that. Obviously,
Yeah.
as anyone else might have just been, oh, hope you have a better day tomorrow. Whereas, yeah, he's the perfect person to have there to actually break it down with you and I guess
Yeah.
support you through change.
It's so true. And he's also the type of person that's extremely skeptical of everything. He'll question everything. He, will really play devil's advocate with everything. And the fact that he tried the breathwork session with me, and he was like, wow, especially because he's so into science and evidence, and there wasn't much about it back then. It was all really in the kind of spiritual realm of breathwork and how we're just trying to discover this modality that's actually been around for like hundreds of thousands of years, that's just coming back into our kind of day in the life now of people realizing, wow, people have been doing this forever. And now we're just getting into like bringing it back that you can use your breath to, well, I would just say it's changed my whole life. But it really can change everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would also be a familiar story for a lot of coaches who, have experienced something, and I'm no different, whether it be fitness or nutrition, where it's like, how does everyone not know this? How's this not a subject at school? Like, this is
Yeah.
powerful stuff. How do we still think that cutting out carbs is great for weight loss, or that running's a great way to lose?
Yes.
Like, yes.
Yeah.
So I think part of that almost kind of comes with a shared responsibility of, I need to spread this, I need to do this, I need to help more people. And, it's very clear and apparent in all of your, social media, and clearly the enthusiasm for which you speak about it. It's sort of like, I need to tell as many people as possible about this.
Yeah, that's what it was. And especially because I was in such a place of one, not believing or just not knowing, I guess, what anxiety was, to then having panic attacks, to then being like introduced to something that I'm like, oh, I would have never tried that if I knew what it was. So, I was in those places of that, changing the anxiety, and then finding something that you can do for free every single day by yourself. You don't need a facilitator to change, your life. And same as exercise, you don't need people, you can do it for free. People just choose not to lean into that sort of stuff.
Yeah, of course. So talk me through the learning process you went through. So clearly that period of time in Bali had a transformative effect on, I guess your whole career path, really, as you've gone
Yeah.
from, hands-on fitness and personal training to now into full-time breath work. What sort of
Mm.
training was there to actually get, I don't even know if there's an accreditation, or if you needed to pass some kind of
Mm-hmm.
test to be able to teach people. Can you run me through that whole education process?
Yeah, so I went to New Mexico and I did my training in New Mexico. So I did a course over there, researched the instructor, and he was taught by someone else. And then you're accredited in different levels to do it. So you can do like level 1, level 2, level 3. I believe now there's level 4 and 5. So for me to do it, I think level 1 is doing one-on-one, and then level 3 is groups. And obviously, as a group fitness instructor at the time, I was like, well, I want to do groups because I want everyone to do this. So I went and did level 3, did the training there. And what I loved about the training was we had to actually do lots of breath work ourselves to kind of clear basically all of our shit out of us, so we can then hold that space for other people, so we're not putting our stuff onto them. And then it's very much the training was very intuitive, very spiritual. It was a very lovely way to learn about the breath work and how it works throughout the body, how, because it works through a 3-part breath, so what different sections of the breath is working through the chakra system. Yeah, it was just really lovely working through all of that, and then at the same time going through a massive healing myself, which I just didn't expect to go through either. So it was life-changing. Yeah.
And so from there, just give us a quick breakdown. I think this is and it certainly helps me understand this. So talk me through the very basics of the science of like breath work, and how it actually impacts the way we kind of respond to situations, I guess. So coming at it from the lens of stress management, like how would a breathing class actually help my physiology and mental capacity to, be able to tolerate high levels of stress?
Yeah, so what you're doing in breath work, and there's so many different forms of breath work, there's different durations, there's different times, there's different intensities. So when I talk about breath work, I probably should have said this at the start. I'm always referring to this style of breath work. So I always like to say that this style is really nourishing. So it's a really slow, deep style of breath work. You're in control of your breath. And with this style, it only gives you what you're ready for. So it's not forceful, it's not hyperventilation, there's no breath holds. I kind of say to people, it's like a wave moving through your body. Like, it's just a really beautiful style of breath. And what you're doing is it's all done through the mouth. So I always say at the start of the class, in the session, it's a healing modality. You breathe through the mouth. Out of the class, always nose breath. Okay, so just so people are not like, oh, do I go around mouth breathing? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Nose breath during the day, mouth breath for the session, and then what we're doing is we're pulling in more oxygen into the body, and
Yeah.
that starts to quieten down the brain, and then it starts to shift and move the energy through the body. So it's moving stuck energy, it's moving trauma through the body, it's moving anxious energy through the body, it's moving emotions through the body, and as it's doing that, it's starting to really quieten down the mind and the brain. And then as it's moving through that, it's just activating through you moving through a more conscious state to activate and work through that storage that's in the brain. So suppressed memories, old emotions, old traumas, and then they start to move through you through your breath. The really beautiful thing about it is as well is I know people always wonder, well, how is it doing that? And it does it so uniquely for different people. So it'll honor how you kind of receive stuff throughout your day. So if you're someone that's very visual, you will see things in breathwork. If you're someone that kind of hears things, you might hear more things. If you're someone that's more intuitive like me, it'll just be like a deep inner knowing that will come through you. And then some people it's really physical. So just depending on how you're open to receiving, your breath will show you that. And it's, I always say as well, it's something that you kind of have to experience rather than talk about it, because it's so
Yeah.
unique to you when you're in the session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It certainly sounds as though, I mean, similar to the benefits of training, when you explain to someone who's not exercising, oh, you'll feel better. They're like, how could I possibly
Yes.
feel better
Yeah. So it's
when
like
I'm
that.
sitting
Yeah.
on the floor and I'm like, I feel like I'm going to die. And it's like, no, no, trust me, you'll have more energy. And they're like, what are you talking about? I will have just emptied the tank.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who have done training will be able to relate to that as sort of just, try it and see
Yeah,
mentality.
and I do say that to people as well. I kind of say to people that go to the gym, I'm like, look at it as if you're coming into a workout. That first 5-10 minutes are so fucking hard. It's shit. You don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And then you start to move through of like, oh, I feel really good actually. I can kind of keep going for a little bit longer. And then
Yeah.
at the end of the session, you're like, wow, I feel great, And it's really funny because breath work is moving stuck emotions and energy. So people will like cry and bawl their eyes out, get rid of all the tears and kind of work through that. And then at the end of the session, they're like, I feel amazing. I feel so good. And they've got like tears in their eyes. It's just really beautiful to
Yeah.
watch. Like they're going through this really big purge or release. And then afterwards, they're like, I feel great.
Could you say that it's almost a similar feeling to, if something is bothering you with Tom, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of like, I don't know if I'm ready to bring it up, but it's on my mind and and it just sort of sits heavier and heavier and heavier. Is it almost just in a similar way, physiologically, of just kind of confronting that and actually getting it out in the open air, and it was never as bad as
Yeah.
you thought it was going to be, and you're so glad that you
Yeah.
spoke about it?
Yeah, always, every single time it does that. And what it does with that as well, like in like real time, if I was in that situation with anyone, the breath work helps create a space of how you react. So it gives you that pause of like, instead of someone like, say, for me, it's like road rage. So if someone's like driving slow, and instead of being like, Merv, get out of my way, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It kind of creates that space of like, do you need to really respond like that? Like, they could be having a bad day, they could be lost. It creates that space in between your thoughts to be like, okay, you need to like, this is your stuff. You can kind of chill and let them do their thing. I'm not rushing. It gives you time to like readjust how you're going to react, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I guess anything that creates a little bit more self-awareness, I find to be typically like a pretty good thing.
Yeah, 100%. It just makes everyone a better human, I think.
Um, I can agree.
Yeah.
The coaching in New Mexico and getting your level 1, 2, and 3, like how soon
Mm.
after that did you start taking your own classes? Like, did you start working for someone else, or like, tell me how you kind of started up your own shop?
So I came back from New Mexico and I was like so desperate to like tell everyone.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? So I started calling yoga studios in Melbourne and I was like, oh, like, I do this breathwork thing. Can I come do it at your studio? And everyone was like, no, we don't do that. Or no, they didn't know what breathwork was. And the funny thing about that now is it's on every single yoga studio timetable I know possible. But at the time they were like, no, we don't know what it is. No, you can't do it. And I was like,
Did you
fuck, everyone's saying,
2018?
sorry,
It's just
I think
for
so.
is it-
Four years ago.
yeah, 2018,
Yeah.
2019.
Yeah. So everyone kept saying no. And I'm like, well, if everyone's going to say no, I need to find a way to do it myself.
Yeah,
So I took a job at a supplement store at AAA Supplements, and I was working there in St. Kilda. And as I was working there, I was still trying to find like somewhere to go, something to do.
yeah,
So a guy walked into the store one day and he was like, oh, I just need to go and look at the shed out the back of the store. Like there's a shed there, I'm checking it out. Or I think he said it was like up for lease or something. And I was like, what? There's a shed? And he's like, yeah, it's up for lease. And I said, I'm looking for a space to do breathwork in. And I was like, can I come check it out? And he's like, absolutely. So I checked out this shed
yeah.
that was on St. Kilda Road at the back of AAA Supplements. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect for breathwork. Like it's small. I only wanted really intimate classes at the time because I was just starting out. And so I just signed the contract and took on this shed and called it the Breathwork Shed, which is like still my logo, and I've still got it in places because I just
I remember
loved it. Yeah. And I was like, so
what on earth
yeah.
is breathwork? Like this prior to I was like, what's a breathwork shed? And
Yeah, that's it.
can you
That was it.
expand a little? So like, what makes a space good for breathwork as opposed to another one? So like, what jumped out about the back shed of a supplement store?
Yeah. I think because it was so cozy, like it was small, it was cozy. It was just like I just had this vision of what I wanted. And I was like, I can do that in this space. Like it was just, and it was my own. So I'm like, oh, I'm not really one for following rules or doing it other people's way. So if I wasn't a yoga studio, I would have been like, no, I don't want to do this. No, I don't want to do that. Like, it just wouldn't have I probably would have clashed. So having like my own timetable and putting in what I wanted to put in and being able to like put candles and sage and oils and just anything everywhere. So that's what I did. And then my first group of people I had in there were actually mixed martial arts athletes who had a fight on, and they wanted to do some breath work to shift some energy and help deepen their breath for the fight. And they were my first group in the shed.
That was going to be my next question is, so you've come back from New Mexico back to Bali,
Yeah.
back to Melbourne again.
Yeah.
How on earth did you get your first client? So obviously through the mixed martial arts, and that's the hardest part about any small business, right? Is like, I've got this thing, I know it's going to help people.
Yeah.
How do I then tell people? How do I get them in? So was there a little bit of a plan around that expansion, or did you just reach out to as many people as you knew? Like, how did you sort of start to get the ball rolling and actually get some demand for the service?
Yeah, I think I was lucky because I had a really good community in the fitness industry. So what I did was I just set up a separate Instagram page at the time called the Breathwork Shed, and I just encouraged people to follow it. I started talking about it, and then they actually reached out to me saying, oh, we'd love to do a session. And then word just started to spread about breathwork, and then that's literally how it kicked off, was word of mouth. Like I just kept my Instagram going, and then as it started kind of moving through people, then I started to build on that. So then I started to get like my website and newsletter. Then I got like business cards, and so I just was building as it was building through people. Like I wasn't someone, and I'm still not to this day, someone that wants to force people to do something they don't want to do. So I was very much like, if you want to try it, it's there, and especially because it's a healing modality, I believe that people should want to choose to step in and do it themselves, rather than like, no, come and do it. And, and forcing people like, you've got to get in and try it, or doing challenges. I was like, just come and try it if you want. And it just worked out really well. And then COVID happened, and that's a whole other story.
And that was
Yeah.
sort of the time that you made the switch to predominantly online stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So COVID happened, and they owned the shed and they owned all the offices in the area. And then basically I had to shut it down because of COVID. And I think they had to shut down other businesses in the area. And at the time I was like, I am not doing breathwork online. Like, it's not going to work. I like to be with people and help them and just really be in their like presence of when they're doing the breathwork. But because COVID happened, I was like, well, people still want to do breathwork. I'm going to have to do it online. So I shifted it all online. And then that was just the best thing I ever did, because then people from Scotland, where I'm from, Scotland started coming online, and then they would tell people, and then it started like reaching like global like people. And I'm like, oh my God, now I can reach more people by doing it online. This is amazing. Why didn't I do this at the start? And then online just went crazy, especially over, the lockdown times, because obviously people were more stressed, people were more anxious, and breathwork was really helping them move through that period. So yeah, I did lots of classes online, and then obviously I'm still doing them to this day. And then when lockdown kind of started disappearing, then I started doing just like events. And by that time, I went from the shed of having maybe max 10 people in there to holding events with like 30 plus people in Mornington, which was amazing. And that's how it all kind of changed, it was a blessing. I didn't want to do it at the time, but now I'm like obsessed with doing it online.
Most of us in that kind of, like I would consider our industries very similar, in that hands-on. It's good to get people face to face. Like, you feel like you can
Yeah.
go a little bit deeper, but there's
Yeah.
absolutely no doubt it's like, actually, you know what? Some stuff can be done over the computer extremely effectively.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and I was really skeptical of it. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work. But it's actually, and what was funny about that is that my teachers are in the States, and I do all my own personal breath work online. And I'm like, I get the most life-changing sessions doing online. Why do I think this is not going to work for my clients? Which was just so funny. But yeah, it's crazy how effective it is online as well. Yeah.
So talk me through a typical breathwork session. I know you said there are many different styles. Like, how many different styles do you practice yourself with your clients?
Oh, just one. And I've tried a couple of other styles, and I just personally don't like them. They don't work for me. And I just don't know anything about any other style. And I openly say that all the time, because I get a lot of messages from people saying, oh, is this your, like the one that you teach, or can I do this one? And I just don't know. I just know this style. I find one that I love, one that works for me. And that's the only style I guide people through. So the way a session works is I always joke, I kind of like over explain what to expect in a session. So I take 15 minutes with every single person that comes in, and I make sure they know what's going on in their body as they're breathing, how the breath work works, what to expect in the session, what might come up. And I make sure they feel okay to step into the breath work, which is so important. Like, you have to feel safe to bring this stuff up. It's not something you should do because your friend said you should do it. You've got to make sure that you want to step into it. So after I've kind of over explained what to expect in the session, we start with just grounding. So kind of getting into our bodies, forgetting the outside world, and really just being in our space, because as adults, it takes so long for us to actually do that. For some people, it's impossible, but it's really nice to just set the pace where you are, of just, slowing everything down really. And then we spend about 30 minutes doing the actual breath work pattern. So it's a 3-part breath where you inhale into your belly. So that's the first inhale. Second inhale is to your chest, so your heart space. And then the third part is the exhale. So we keep moving through that for 30 minutes. And then there's different phases that works through as it's going through that. Then after the 30 minutes, we spend 10 minutes in Shavasana, which is like a really deep meditation. And that's where you bring it back to just your normal breath, so your body can integrate the session. Most people kind of say, oh, we just come for the Shavasana, because it's a really beautiful space to be in, because that's kind of when it's like a cool down, I guess, of a workout where you're just like, oh, I feel good, I'm stretching, this feels nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then at the very end of the session, I individually check in with everyone just to make sure they're feeling okay, if they have any questions, if they need help with the integration side of it. And it's kind of cool just to listen to everyone's stories of what came up in their session or how it was or what they experienced. And then, yeah, that's how it works. And I encourage people to go journal and just, really sit with themselves after the session just to make sure they're integrating it.
Yeah. Okay. So roughly an hour-ish.
Yeah, an hour. And then for beginners, probably like an hour 15, because I use that start time to explain it to them.
Yeah. And without obviously sharing too much information, because it does sound quite personal for, like any kind of memory or trauma that is coming up for people. Like, what sort of results have you seen with clients of yours? Are there any that come to mind as something like, this person was struggling through whatever it may be, and it's sort of really helped them just understand and, I guess, just move through their days with a lot less stress, really?
Yeah, it's hard for me to answer that because every single person takes away something. But I always share this story of when I went to, it was a gym actually. I went to a gym in Melbourne and someone kind of hired me to do breathwork with their staff. So I did breathwork and they were all extremely skeptical about it. And it was like a fitness center. So I had people that were in their 70s. I had people that were like 16 and they were all in the same group. So anyway, there was a guy there that was, I'd say he was in his late 70s, maybe 80s, who was there. So you could tell he did not want to be there. He did not want to do this staff bonding, breath work, whatever.
What sort of hippie nonsense is this?
Like, so just something you'd probably never heard of. But anyway, he gave it a crack. He did the breath work, and I knew as I was watching, I was like, he's going through something really cool. And I'm hoping he kind of shares at the end, but he didn't share. And then as everyone was kind of leaving, he's like, oh, do you mind if I just share something with you now that everyone had gone? I was like, yeah, of course. And he pulled me aside and he said that when his mum was giving birth to him, she actually passed away. And the breath work took him back to that very moment that he met his mum before she passed. And he said it was the most profound thing he's ever experienced in his whole life. And he couldn't believe that the breath work took him back to that space as if he'd met his mother. And it was just a really beautiful thing to hear. So yeah, that was probably the most profound thing I just always remember that, from just coming from this old guy, didn't want to do it. And he kind of, I guess, met his mum again in that space.
Well, I'm not surprised you haven't forgotten that. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, isn't it? I know. And especially coming from a guy that just was like, I do not want to be here. So yeah, he just absolutely loved it. He said it was the most incredible experience he's ever had. So yeah, that was a good one.
I asked you before we came on, I gave you a little bit of background about, the people who we train, and most of them in a nutshell are kind of, parents who are trying to be fit, healthy. They're trying to be everything to everyone all the time. And as a result are super short on time. And managing stress is a conversation that I'm having more and more in the gym. And a lot of my advice around this is, I think, and you can tell me if I'm way off. I think in a similar vein to what you're talking about with breath work, which is just slowing everything down. And I try and encourage people to do something, a hobby that they enjoy, where they can only focus on one thing. And the example I always give is, well, I like to play guitar. I'm rubbish at it, but I'm doing it. And it's when I'm on guitar, I can't scroll my phone. I can't watch TV at the same time. I mean, Daniel, I can't parent, and I certainly can't. Like, sometimes it's mental at home. Harry will just be crying, and I'll be in my own little world. But what's I guess, is there a breathwork pattern or a simple exercise that someone can do at home if they're interested in just trialing to see the benefits? Is there a way that they can practice, some of the benefits without, I guess, investing an hour 15 in a full breathwork class?
Yeah, for sure. I can send you the link so you can
Yeah,
share
I'll
with
add it in
people. Like,
and I'll definitely
yeah.
spread it around.
Yeah, I've got like a free YouTube. I think the YouTube's like 15 minutes, but it tells you the breathwork pattern. And then when you know the breathwork pattern, you can do that. So what I encourage people to do is do it to like a song you love. So if there's like a 3-minute song, I wouldn't do more than 7 minutes because ideally you need a facilitator for that, especially if you're new to this work. But find a song you love and do the pattern to the song. So if you're on Spotify, you can look up Siobhan Lou, and I've actually created, I think there's like 17 playlists for my clients who use it. They've got one song you do the breathwork pattern to, and then one song for Shavasana where you just do your normal breath. So that's the most important part of it. But even just sitting and taking 3 really deep belly breaths is going to change your whole mind, body, whatever you're going through in that moment. And I think that's the easiest thing. And like I said earlier, it's about finding a breath work that works for you, because some people don't like the forceful fast, I certainly don't, breath because it makes me more anxious. Some people don't like breathing through their mouth, some people find it hard holding their breath. So I think the main thing would be like YouTube. Honestly, if you go onto YouTube, you can find any form of friggin' breath work you want and just practice it. But with this one, yeah, try the YouTube. If when you know the breath, you can do that for 5 minutes. Me and Tom actually did it last night before we went to sleep, because it's really good for calming and slowing everything down. So if you're someone that struggles to, sorry?
That was going to be my next question, is like,
Ah,
or bed with, I think now people are they know how important sleep is. It is,
oh, so important,
but
especially for women.
yes, absolutely. But there's also just that trouble that we have where it's like I hit the pillow and then my mind's racing and I'm thinking about this.
Yes.
I call it that tired but wired sensation where it's like I'm exhausted and I still can't go to sleep. And
Yeah.
that was going to be my question, is this a good thing to do after a shower before bed? And I think that answers the question that yes, absolutely it is.
Yeah, so I'm the opposite. I will fall asleep anywhere, anytime, in seconds. Like I don't have that issue. Whereas
I
Tom
understand, yeah.
he studies late, so he does breath work before he goes to sleep. Whereas I've just done my breath work, like I do it first thing in the morning because it actually energizes me to like get stuff done. It makes me more creative. And so if Tom's lying in bed at night and he's like, I'm gonna do some breath work, sometimes I'm like, I'll just do some too. But and he's like zonked out in Shavasana, snoring, he's done, he's asleep, So if you're someone that's wired before bed, I would 100% recommend trying breath work. And I think it's important to know when you're doing it, your mind is going to be fucking crazy. Your mind is going to be bonkers. It's going to be like, it's going to try and pull you out of the breath work because your brain's job is to protect you. It'll hate that you're changing your breath. It'll hate that you're listening to a new voice. It'll hate the music. Your only goal is to keep the pattern moving. So let your mind do its job, let it be busy. And when you catch it with so much compassion for doing its job. Just notice it and then bring it back to your breath. So it's like, oh, what's for dinner? What am I doing tomorrow? Did I do this? Did I do that? Just like, oh, I see you, but let's come back to the belly breath, to the chest breath. And that's the whole point in it. You're trying not to fight it. You're just letting it do its thing. It's hard work. That's why it's called breath work. And it's practice, and it's just like a gym workout. Like you're not going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do one session and get abs tomorrow. Like it's just not going to happen. You got to do the work to get the mind to be quiet, and it's a lot. Our minds are not designed for that, so they've got a job to do, and it's up to us to kind of work to create that space and help it either slow down or catch it. So yeah, it's hard. So just so people know that before they try it, they're like, people give up so easily. Oh, I can't do it, my mind was everywhere. And it's like, yeah, your mind's meant to be everywhere.
All part of it.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's any kind of, you said there that you need to practice it, like, and the similarities to the gym there, obviously, of, you need to get back to me after 12 weeks, like it takes time. Is there any kind of correlation between how quickly people can experience the benefits and how kind of ready they are to actually try it? Like, do you sometimes find that a lot of the reason that people are struggling is because they're kind of not ready to experience it in a way, or they're still a little bit skeptical? Like, is there anything that you think, oh, when you meet a person, and I'm the same here, you can kind of tell almost straight away if they're going to be successful quickly, or if you need to kind of hold their hand through early periods? Like, you're able to kind of get a pretty good read on clients pretty much as soon as they walk through the door.
Yeah, I think it's all about the discipline with yourself and the dedication to the breath. So if you can keep the pattern moving, you're going to get a better experience. But if you keep stopping, starting, it's not going to flow. And that's the goal, I guess, like a training session. You want it to keep moving, you want to keep it flowing. You don't want to like cool down and then get warm, and vice versa. So I think it's, yeah, and I always explain breathwork's kind of like an onion. So sometimes it will be like really thin layers that will start to strip back. For others, it can be like thick layers and it'll get to the juicy stuff. And for me, I always say my onion kind of exploded on my very first session. It blew my mind. So it's just, and you can get that. You'll never know what session that's going to be. And that's the kind of fun in it, because every single breathwork session will honor that day, where you're at, how you're feeling, what's coming up, and it'll only give you what you're ready for. So depending on how open you are, you're probably going to get more out of it. But the other side of that is if you have a really high expectation, you're probably not going to get anything from it. Like, you've got to let go of attachments, expectations. And the way I go into it is like, just show me what I need to see. And then just really trusting that whatever your breath gives you, that's exactly perfect for that day.
Love it. I ask
Yeah.
this question, well, this is episode number 2 of the podcast, but I'm going to ask this question to everyone who comes on. What is something that you've changed your mind on recently?
Ooh, recently.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Big, something small, anything you like.
I wouldn't say this is like recent, but it was something huge I changed my mind on, which you might love, was that I was a vegetarian for a very long time. And then I started eating meat again. And my health completely changed from going kind of animal based, I guess. And that was something huge I changed my mind on. And it was kind of recent. So yeah.
That is actually massive. That's way bigger. That's way bigger than I was expecting.
I'm just gonna put it out there.
Was that something that was recommended to you by a dietitian or a doctor, or something that you thought, nah, I think I need to try this again?
No, so my body was craving meat. I was just one day craving it so bad. And obviously, because I do a lot of breath work and meditation, I really listen to it. Like, I don't even second guess it. So one day I just said to Tom, I think I'm just going to start eating meat again. Like, I'm craving it. I want it. And then that day I went out, bought chicken, had it. And I felt really good. And that was it. And then, yeah.
Vegans listening.
Apologies. Hey, I'm not like again, I'm never someone that's like against something for something, but for me personally, it was just getting to a time where I'm like, okay, something needs to change.
Yep.
And then I kind of went like, and then when I start that, I kind of go way into it. So I'm like, oh, I'm just going to try like animal based for a while. And then, I did that and it really worked for me. But at the same time, I kind of go through these cycles, because when I was eating so much meat prior to being a vegetarian, I was just like, this is not working, I need to change. Then I went vegetarian, it was working, then it wasn't working. So yeah, but now I'm like back into fully eating meat. I probably eat more meat than Tom.
Are you saying that you've got a little bit of that all or nothing mentality thing? Because it's so
probably
so common in
probably
our, I think it's like, I'm in and I'm all in and I'm going to get every benefit possible.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I researched it, started following people on Instagram. Yeah, and then I feel so good, and even adding, it was funny because I was so like anti-dairy, and now I eat like dairy all the time, and I'm like, oh, it just like works for me so well. And I'm like, especially because I'm Scottish, like it's so silly for me not to have meat and dairy, like with this Scottish blood, I should be eating all of that sort of stuff. So that was, yeah, a big change for me.
That is a change. Siobhan, where can people find you if they'd like to find out more about breathwork or shoot you a message? I'll attach the YouTube video in the show notes, but where can people learn more?
It's just Siobhan Lou everywhere. So Instagram, Facebook, my website, Siobhan Lou, and then obviously YouTube's the same. So yeah, if anyone has any, I mean, I spend majority of my day answering breathwork questions. So if anyone has any breathwork questions, reach out. If you want to try a class, beginners are welcome to all classes. And I try to make some of them, I've got a lot of parents that come, so I try and make it parent friendly for the times. So if you're a parent, you can come along. But yeah, any questions, I'd love to answer them. And yeah, try the free YouTube one, see how you go, and enjoy it. Have fun with it. You gotta make it fun.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on, taking time out of your day. And we had a little bit of a hiccup with the time zone changes now that you're up in Queensland, but I'm glad
we got there.
I'm glad we were able to figure it out in the end. And I'm sure a lot of people will have some pretty cool takeaways, because I think if you had have asked our clients, well, even as soon as maybe 3 years ago, they're like, oh, they're talking to a breathwork teacher, they would have been like, huh? Weird, but that sort of I guess you would call it like mental health space, that just hold the power of the mind is something that I think I've maybe embraced a little bit more, probably ever since COVID, actually, and the impact on how all of these efforts that we can go to for our health, like they all blend into the same thing. Like physical health,
they really do,
can't exist without mental health. Mental health can't exist without all related.
So true. So true. Yeah, totally agree.
Grateful for you for coming on. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks for having me.